All right, we are on part two of our followership series of three parts. And so, just to recap what we talked about on Monday in this chat is kind of five reasons, and I think there are more, but these are just kind of the five that I think are really important as to why we should study and understand followership just to the same degree as we do leadership. Is that first, learning to follow teaches us how to lead. Like if you need to learn to follow well in order to lead well. Emphasizing followership in a team setting gives everyone a role on the team. Like just because you're not a captain or you're not a senior or you're not a higher level executive or whatever it is, right? You're not a seniored employee, you're not a tenured professor, doesn't mean that you're left off the hook, right? You still have a role, you still have responsibility to the team in the direction that it's going. Then we have not everyone wants to be a leader. I'm a firm believer in this. I have a lot of friends who just want to be assistant coaches, the top assistant the rest of their lives. They don't want to be in that head coach seat. And a lot of people shouldn't be. I think there are people who are just not born with those innate traits. I do believe leadership can be developed, but like I'll use my 8-year-old as an example. Never gonna be the guy. Never gonna be that guy. Could be a really good contributor and a very good follower, and the leader's first cheerleader, but he's never gonna be the one that commands the huddle, right? Without followers, there would be no movements, and we're going to talk about that more in part three. But a person out there doing something without anyone around them, it's just a person out there doing something, right? It's when folks decide and declare, oh, that person's on to something. Let's go do something about this. And then everyone leads and then follows and then leads at some point. And so what do I say by that is like even someone, think of your boss, maybe your head coach, right? Um, Even someone who is ultimately responsible for a program or a team or a branch of the organization is probably still reporting to someone else. So that person is leading and following and has to be able to distinguish between when to do which one, right? So reactions to those for the ones who are first time kind of hearing this, thoughts? I know it's repetitive, Ryan and Brandon for sure. Anyone have one that stands out to them? Told you I'm gonna ask you to talk.
I feel like it probably leads a lot into the saying where we have too many chiefs and not enough Indians.
Hmm.
A lot of people want to be the head honcho, and a lot of people aren't willing to take the criticism and the the lead of being the follower in a lot of instances. And I had to learn that very early in my career as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's definitely where like the saying like too many cooks in the kitchen comes from, right? Somebody's gotta back away, be the sous chef. Somebody's gotta go set the table and make sure the table in the restaurant looks right. Somebody's gotta be that host or hostess in the front. So yeah, that's a great point. So when y'all think about this, right, and you can see this little table here, but like when you think about, and we talked about this a little bit in the first one, like synonyms, when you think about a follower, we talked about, oh, the follower's weak, they don't have a mind of their own, they just kind of go through life, without really any clear direction. They can be passive, right? We talked about some of these word associations with followership and followers. What about leaders? Like, what do you think of when you think about a leader?
I think they're accountable, like for their actions and for themselves.
Okay, accountable.
I'd say they're organized. To be able to lead, you need to know what needs to be done and how to do it. So I think that that's helpful.
Okay,
I was thinking of them as like an example. They need to set the example of a tone of like what the expectations are.
okay. I'm writing these down. Keep going. Any others? So we got accountability, like they're accountable to stakeholders, to their team, right? They're accountable, they're organized, they have a plan, they can execute the plan. They can delegate, maybe that falls under organizing. They set the example, they set a tone, and everyone knows expectations based off of them and their behavior. Could we say the same things for really effective followers? Okay. That's kind of what I want you getting kind of used to. In part one, we talked about some things that followers maybe do, right? And we also talked about, well, leaders may do the same things, right? And so, um, again, just drawing your attention to that, like following really is just as important and powerful as someone's ability to lead and lead well. So when you think about a leader-follower dynamic, like when these two folks get in the room, or you have a leader at in the front of a conference table or a video room, and you have and they're addressing everyone else, what kind of words do you think of when it comes to the dynamic between those two groups or those two people?
I think
Like
like,
respect.
oh,
Oh, sorry.
my bad.
Sorry.
I think like a follower should be able to like challenge the leader.
Okay.
Like they should be able to bring that initiative and like, speak their own mind to try to like, hold that leader in place.
Love that. We're gonna get to that.
I think there has to be like a mutual respect between the leader and the follower. Like the follower listens to the leader, but at the same time, the leader is listening to what like the follower needs.
Okay.
I want to touch on what Gabby said. I was going to say open communication. I
Huh?
think for the leader and the follower, both of that is really important to how they work as a team, especially with this dynamic. So being able to listen and also take direction well from one another, I think fits well with their dynamic.
So let's think about these two things, and I want you to think about them both ways, right? If a follower is someone who should be able to challenge, someone who has a mind of their own, is able to form opinions, have thoughts, has done the research, right? So in that example, what Ryan said, what would happen if that wasn't in the room? Like if a follower didn't or couldn't challenge the leader.
I mean, I think it would be pretty stagnant between like the leader and the follower. Like the leader would just be leading as they please with no like challenge or like anything in between. And then honestly, I don't think there would be any growth between the leader or the follower.
Yeah, there'd be just a lot of dictating, right? And maybe we would see these followers as minions. I've seen all of the minions. I have children. I've seen all the Despicable Me's, all the minions, right? So maybe that's how it would be. It's just, orders, direct orders, and then they go and execute. So what about with the respect? What if the respect from a follower wasn't there? And I think that introduces a different kind of dynamic than the lack of challenge. If there was a lack of respect on the follower's behalf.
I think that's where you run into like quiet quitting and people, sabotaging the workplace or the team or whatever because like they're not feeling like they get the recognition they deserve because they're, in the trenches doing the work. And I think that can lead to a lot of like um, open kind of hostility and just neglecting responsibilities.
Yeah, I think that's great. If there's no respect, like you tell me go do something, am I going to run off and get that done to the best that I can, right? Chad, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it creates a lot of division, especially if you have like a big group of people. You start to see two different sides of the people that want to do kind of what is said to be done, and you have the other group of people that are just like kind of going on their own because they don't believe in like the vision and what we were trying to do with the program.
Yeah, I think that's great. You had some who have both feet in, some who are 1 foot out, and some who are 2 feet out, right? And then what does that create in a locker room setting, or what does that create in a conference room setting, right? Or if the team's trying to accomplish something. All right, this is good. So I want to have a little bit of a debate here. Again, just talking and thinking about, we put a lot of we kind of tend to put our leaders like up on these pedestals, right? As the people who just like made all these things happen. But I want you to think about like, you know, I'm a big believer that nothing great's ever accomplished alone. And and if they didn't have these folks with them, would they have accomplished those things? So like here's my first example. This is Nemo and Dory. Okay. The examples will get different. It's not all cartoon characters. But like who in this partnership had more impact on the team's success? Marlin and Dory. Does everybody know the movie?
Couldn't you like theoretically say either one? because like she had like
Aaron-
a huge impact on who Marlon was, but he was like kind of the leader, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's what I want. This is this conversation. I want to hear. I want to hear your takes on it.
I think he had like the most growth, but I feel like she had to push him towards that growth and like maybe she wasn't aware of the full situation and the whole like heavy dynamics of it, but she was the one that like got him out the door and pushed him to do things.
Yeah, she's way more likable just from like talking to people, the sharks, the turtles, the whales. He didn't know how to speak whale.
I
He's
think that also goes back to where you said you can't do anything alone. So Marlon wouldn't have been able to do the things that he did and went the way that he did if Dory wasn't there helping. So I feel like that's mutual on helping each other and taking direction from each other.
Yeah, like Marlon clearly had the vision and the purpose. Like he was looking for his son. It was his son. But like, does he get to Sydney without Dory? She could read Escape, right? She could speak to the whale. She was the one who tried to get him to not go through the jellyfish, right? And finally it clicked for him. And Marlon benefited from their relationship. He became a bit more well-rounded of a fish. Okay, this one usually doesn't. We'll skip the Gilmore Girls. All right, but let's go Jordan and Pippen.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I think Jordan would still have been, you know, a great player, but obviously, like he wouldn't have won the championships that he had won. Just because, not only was like Pippen there to push him, but was also there, to like advocate for him and to get him the ball, which he kind of needed. So
Yeah, he arguably could still be the GOAT, and he is in my mind. Don't come at me with LeBron. And so like he's the GOAT, but does he have the rings to back up that without the other folks around him, without Kukoc, right? Without Kerr, right? So like he's a great player, but does he win the way he won? Anything else?
Yeah, I feel like every Batman needs a good Robin.
Yeah.
I feel like that was probably the best example of that. Not only just Scotty, but some of the other pieces of everybody buying into their role, just buying into being the follower and letting Jordan have all the spotlight. I think that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think I used to have Batman and Robin up on these sides. I don't anymore though. All right, let's do another one. I think I have two more. Okay, so Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. It's testing your history knowledge. Does the civil rights movement become what it became without Rosa Parks refusing to get up? Because it was kind
No.
of DOA a little bit.
He kind of like led the way by like motivating the thoughts. But she was kind of the boots on the ground, I guess you could say, who like did the action.
Yeah, she was a huge catalyst. So when you think about impact, what arguments can you make?
I don't think as they did without the other one, like building off of each other, like there was that the common goal of civil rights and stuff, but it took multiple people from multiple angles crying out to make something happen.
Yeah, so again, back to that first slide of without followers, there are no movements. Like Dr. King was out there saying what he wanted to say, right? But it didn't really matter if he was saying what he wanted to say if other people weren't boots on the ground putting it into action. All right, I think I have one more. Yeah, okay. I'm assuming everyone knows who all these people are. That's why I skipped over Gilmore Girls because I didn't know if y'all would. What about these two? Greatest impact on success for the partnership. I used to have Belichick and Brady as one slide, if anyone wants to tackle that, but they're not. I can't promote Belichick now that he's at Carolina.
I don't think Belichick is who he is at all without Tom Brady, but I think Tom Brady can win without Belichick.
Okay.
And we've kind of
Because
seen what
Tampa Bay.
Bill, we've seen what Belichick looks like without a Tom Brady, and it's not very good.
Anybody else on Jay-Z and Beyonce?
I think they kind of feed off of each other's success, and I think that's why they work better together because they kind of focus on their own strengths and their own weaknesses and use that to help each other, promote each other to be better all together.
Yeah, I think they're both very smart business people. So there's a lot of strategy involved there. How do we feel about Bad Bunny at the Super Bowl? Like a thumbs up, this is what I do with my 8-year-old after school every day. I go like this and he tells me when to stop. We're middle of the road, middle. Okay, nobody's super excited. Would we have been more excited about the other names I saw were Adele and Taylor? Like who knows if those are even true. Okay. Boo, I'm getting my vinyl on Taylor. It's been shipped. I got confirmation. It's coming. I'm very excited. All right. So let's see. So what I wanted to do, I just quickly, this is not like, obviously we don't have like tests in this class or anything, but I wanted to go over this with y'all to give you a little bit understanding of the history of followership and kind of how it's evolved a little bit, our understanding and our approach to studying it. So the first time anyone ever thought, oh, we should be looking at this too. Hey, all you leadership researchers, we need to be paying attention to the other guys. What were the rest of the folks doing? This was a guy named Zelznick back in 1965. All right. And so um, his work kind of started everybody else looking into followership, and you'll see how it progresses. But he really just kind of how he did, chapter one in our text, just trait theory. What makes a good leader? Well, he did the same thing. What makes a good follower? And he kind of looked at it from these two perspectives of dominance versus submission, right? Are they really like inserting themselves, right? Or are they more submissive? And then what's their level of activity? All right. So when you kind of first see this, like 1965, that's 60 years ago, anything jump out at you? Just reactions to this type of graph model? So someone who is really active and highly dominant could be a little impulsive, right? Someone who's more passive, compulsive, a little bit more reactive. Anything jump out at you? Besides, we shouldn't really say words like masochistic in 2025. So,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I've always heard of like impulsive as like synonym to like reckless. Um, so as a follower, like, I think if you can have like good impulsive behaviors of like you feel like something needs to be done and you go do something, but it's just interesting. Like in my mind, I always equate it to like something negative,
Yeah.
especially as a follower.
Yeah, I think we probably could have had a better word choice, all the choices all the way around. But I think of like impulsive could really be someone who does serve as a catalyst in some case, right? That you see something and you're gonna act on it, right? You get it, the message handed down, you're gonna do something about it, right? You want to take control, that dominant characteristic with that activity, right? So that's kind of how I see it too. I think Zelznick was in 1965 and his language kind of shows that. So Kelly, all right, fast forward and Kelly's coming out and this was one of the articles that y'all read. And he has his two axes are independence, like how well can you think for yourself and how well are you okay working on your own? How well can you think critically versus someone who's a bit more dependent, right? Wants someone to do the thinking for them. And he's stuck with that whole passive active, right? So continue to look at characteristics. And so I'm not going to go through all of these for you. I think they're pretty self-explanatory based on their names. So like, what do you think the characteristics of a sheep would be? Someone who is extremely passive and doesn't have a mind of their own. It's a sheep, guys. Sheeps need what?
Shepherds,
Sheeps need
Yeah, they
shepherd.
need a shepherd.
hogs,
Okay, otherwise, what will a sheep do?
walk off
They
a cliff.
wander off on their own and just do whatever they want to do because they're worried about eating more than anything else.
Correct. They'll wander off, they'll get lost, right? And then what happens to the shepherd? They don't get paid, or they lose their job, right? Or they don't make as much money as they would have, right? And so then you move over and you still have those people who can't really think that well for themselves, but they're a bit more active. They're a bit more proactive. They're a bit more involved with what's going on. And those are your yes people. And what are they like?
Just to do everything you ask type of person.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Head down, just say yes. I'll get it done, right? Not going to question anything. Not going to ask why, right? Okay, so you kind of see there are the four: alienated, sheep, yes people, effective, and then the people in the middle, right? Survivors. These are the ones who kind of like, what's the chameleons a little bit, right? Those are the ones that like shade themselves and blend in, right? So they're just more pragmatist. They're just kind of figuring it out. What do I need to be in this just so I can get through and get to the next thing? So we move forward. Ira Chaleff, he wrote two books. He's more of a consultant. The other three are more academic folks. And so Ira Chaleff has written two books. I mentioned in the first Zoom. One is called Courageous Follower, and the other one's called Intelligent Disobedience. So you can probably, from those titles, get an idea of where he's coming from with his work around followership. So he's really, his concern was for those folks at lower level, maybe entry level positions, folks new to organizations, right? And he had his the two things he was looking at the intersection between were support, like how supportive are the follower of their leader, right? And how well and how strongly can the follower challenge the leader. So I think it's really interesting, right? Again, if we think back to Kelly's model, that top right-hand quadrant, which I would say is probably the ideal, he had labeled as effective followers. And in this one, the higher the challenge and the higher support, then that's going to put that follower in a partner category. So when we think about, and I think this is kind of what y'all were getting at when we had that table out in the beginning, when you think about a partnership relationship between leader and follower, what else is going on there? Y'all talked about challenge and you talked about mutual respect, communication. Is there anything else?
Maybe collaborative decision making, not unilateral.
Yeah, they're getting input, creating some buy-in, right? Anything else?
I'd say trust. I feel like, especially in a partnership, that's really helpful to be able to trust your partner to do what they need to do and knowing that you need to do what you need to do too. Just having that mutual trust between that and a partnership is something that is really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think in a partnership, like a real true strong partnership, there's not a lot of things that are going to fall through the cracks there, right? That's what I think of when I think of trust, right? Like all bases are covered. We're dotting our I's, our T's are crossed because we're trusting each other to get it done and we're trusting each other to be thorough. Anything else?
I mean, through this model, like obviously support, but like support in the instance of like you can tell the leader and the follower when you need something done, even like having the hard conversations in a way. Like, so like not too friendly where you're like, oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings, but at the same time be like, okay, this is how it is.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that if support and challenge are going hand in hand, then those are what the conversations have to be like, right? You're not just walking by letting things happen that shouldn't be happening, and you're able to call out someone, right, for lack of a better word, right, or have the hard conversations of this isn't working. We need to try something different. We've utilized all of our resources and we're about to be broke, right? So I think that's a great point of how those two things really interact. And so the most recent one's from Barbara Kellerman, which that article was in the module as well. And she simply just looked at it from a level of engagement. Has anyone ever taken Strengths Quest assessment? Just out of curiosity. Everybody heard of Strengths Finders? That gives you like your top 5 strengths. No? Okay. Well, this is kind of in line with that when really just looking at like how do we get people more engaged and what is the level of engagement of employees in an organization? And so that's really what she examined. And so my questions to you, as you can kind of see, is like the lowest level is someone who really just isolates themselves, isn't really engaged, kind of off on their own, doing their own thing, right? Then kind of the bystander that's just sitting around watching stuff. They're observing, maybe they're slightly more engaged, but they're still not doing anything. And then this person who maybe dips their toe in the water, right, starts signing up to help with other things or projects that are happening. And then the activist who feels attached to the cause and is go out there and promote it. And then our diehards, right, live, die. They're the people who have painted their bellies for the game and aren't wearing shirts in December in an outdoor stadium, right? So you kind of get that spectrum. And so my questions to y'all, I have 2 questions on here. What are different strategies for you when you think about leading people to increase a follower's engagement? What would you do?
I think part of it is relieving a little bit of your power to them. I feel like if you give them a little bit of power, they're more likely to be engaged. And hopefully there are people that can have a positive part of the power, and not use it for negative issues.
Yeah, I think that's good. I'm curious what other folks think about that. Anybody have a response to Trad? Because I don't know if in thinking of, you know, some of the different jobs I've had, I think there are some people that don't even want the power. I think there's some people like, what do you do with the person who I want to come in, I want to do my time card, I want to punch in, I want to punch out? What do you do with that person besides not hire them?
I've always found like with my employees, and they've even said it to me, like actually having a relationship with them, like more than just a working relationship, and that usually leads to a little more engagement. Like if they, if I'm asking them like what's going on in their life, to an extent, like there's still that professionalism, but if you actually take time to know your people, like they're much more willing to engage with your ideas and share their own. That's what I found.
Okay. So make sure the share the love, share the power, right? Give them empower them to do things, and then we have build relationships, cultivate those things that aren't work related. Maybe there's stuff that happens outside of the office, right? Okay. Anything else? One more.
I feel like going along with what Trad said about, giving some of the followers some more power, and then you saying, what if some of them don't want it? I think it could be more so looked about um, like the best way I can think about it is like a football staff. So like you have the head coach, you have like the offense coordinators, like they're still followers, but they have more power than some of the other coaches. So maybe like some of the followers that would want more power are able to, be your second voice, and then, kind of like a hierarchy almost.
So intentionally asking someone, I think that that's a really good idea, and we'll talk about that a bit in part 3. But if you're an OC or a DC or whatever it is, and you can't, even a head coach of a football team, I can't imagine like doing all of it, but even as a coordinator doing all of it. So who else on your staff, right, has that potential to be an extension of you, right? And to really developing and pouring into that person. I think that's great. So my other question is like what responsibility then falls on the follower? So, if we're talking about these people and we want to enhance their level of engagement and we're talking about someone who's maybe 2 or 3 years on the job, like what responsibility falls on the follower to pursue a better level of engagement? Because this is a dynamic, right? Like the leader's got to be trying to increase it, the follower's got to be actively pursuing it. So what's that responsibility of the follower?
I
I
would say
think,
like,
go ahead.
oh, sorry.
I think actively being engaged and just knowing your role and knowing what to do, but also not being afraid to ask for help because we've definitely seen people struggle, and that's where things kind of can lead to lower engagement if they feel like they're not pulling their weight, but just knowing when to ask for help and knowing people will support you, I think would also be a good responsibility to have as a follower.
Yeah, great. Gain clarity, right? And ask questions, right? Asking for help is a big one too, but like gaining clarity, ask for questions. How can I help? What else can I do? Right? I think those are great, Riley. I think Gabby and then Trey.
I was also gonna say like knowing your role, like a lot of times in college athletics, sometimes why teams fall apart is because a lot of the individuals or the followers don't know their role, which causes like such an issue. And then also providing like feedback to like the leaders of like what's working, what's not working, this is engaging us, this isn't engaging us.
I would love to ask about what have you seen the most of, like if a follower doesn't know their role, how what have you seen most derail a team's success? Is it
Um,
kind of do like too much? Um,
like So I played soccer in undergrad, and a big thing with us was my sophomore year. Um, just like individuals were either overstepping or they were upset with their role. Like they couldn't come to terms with, okay, like I'm not going to be like, for example, like a 90-minute player. Like my job is just to go in for 15 minutes and do what I can do, and then I'm going to be back on the bench. And it caused like a lot of confusion for the whole team because then our coach would try to like satisfy those players with like telling them things, and then like it was just a mess. It was not good. And then it caused, obviously, in the long run, for a very unsuccessful season.
yeah, so mixed messages around roles and then inability to come to terms with them. Okay. Trey, what were you gonna say?
It was just kind of like going back a little bit, like when in terms of the follower and like what their what their responsibility is it's kind of like, in my opinion, a responsibility on themselves if they want to grow, that they have to step up and like try the new thing or step up and ask those questions, like Riley said. Because if you don't ask questions, you don't learn something new, you're not going to grow at, like personally or even just into a new position.
Yeah, they have to take on some like responsibility for their own development, right? Like you're hopefully if you've chosen to attach yourself to a decent leader, there's gonna be some improvement naturally, right? But then you're also responsible for the rate in which that happens. So pursuing ways to get better. So I'm gonna put you in breakout groups and I'll try and share this screen with you, but I put all four so you can kind of see how this has progressed, right? You had Zalesnik in 65, Kelly in 92, Chalif in 95, and then Kellerman in '08. And so I have some questions I want you here to kind of discuss that are about you. If you think about yourself right now, you're probably at some point following, right? What characteristics do you exhibit in your follower role? What type of follower do you really need to be, and how close are you to that mark? Do we need to be developing ourselves back to that responsibility of engagement, right? And then also, lastly, what characteristics, if you were the leader, what characteristics would you look for in a follower? Like, what type of follower would you need on your team, you think, in order to lead them successfully? All right, so those are the three questions. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to discuss, and then we'll come back and wrap up.
Why can't you see yourself?
You can see yourself right there. Well, you can come and sit, or you can go back and do your movie.
Yo, what the?
We have a guest lecturer today. Do you want to say hi? Our 5-year-old's on fall break for a whole week. Come here. Okay, all right, we'll go finish your movie then. Okay, there you go. All right, so what y'all talk about? Let's go through these. What follower characteristics do you currently exhibit? What y'all have?
We kind of all agreed. We said that we all have some sort of like conformist traits, but also um being able to like adapt and kind of be like that survivor that was in the middle at times, based on the certain circumstances that are required, able to kind of jump from role to role. And if you need to, take lead on something, then you're able to do that. If you have to sit back and just do what you're told, then you can do that as well, and just kind of based on the situation.
Yeah, I can see why many of you would say conformist. I imagine most of you are in a primarily follower kind of role. Am I mistaken? Okay, so you're maybe learning, yeah, Tyler, so you're learning a little bit of the ropes, right? You're learning kind of where this career you want to take it, where it could take you. Um, my question, I guess, around the survivor thing, and this is the first time I've kind of thought through this, is do you think that that is a stepping stone to becoming an effective? Because I could also see how you could just get stuck there in survival mode. So, like, how would you go about using it to propel you, right? Using it for growth versus just staying in that survival cycle.
I mean, a lot of us are like just starting or like recent graduate students. So I would say, as the time being, like understanding our back to the role situation, like understanding our role in the aspect of like learning, but also at the same time, when we do get that experience, like having the ability and like like the nerve to like stick up for what we know we should do and getting out of that survivor like instincts.
Yeah, I'm tracking with you. I mean, kind of what I'm hearing is a lot of people like to say, leave a place better than you found it. But like, say you got this role, well, you're probably not the first person in this role. Maybe you are. If you are, congratulations. But if I think if you're staying in that, in that hamster wheel of survival, then the role's staying the same for whoever the next person is that has it. But if you're using it, that survival kind of space to eventually hop into effective, right? Hop into exemplary, um, whatever it is, then maybe you're leaving that role better for the next person. It's a different role. It's a little bit better of a role, right? And so maybe that helps a bit, if I think what you're kind of saying, Gabby.
Yeah, for sure. And also like just the aspect of like trying or like let's like for me like I work underneath someone who's older than me, obviously like I'm the GA, but like being able to be like, okay, like this is what I think you should do in the future for like your the next individual coming through, like just getting used to having those like qualities so when I'm in that position I can like do the same for someone else.
Yeah, I think that's great. I can remember like when I went from being an assistant coach at Francis Marion to assistant coach at Charlotte, and we had a like an office manager, and the manager and I were the same age, and it took a while for us to get um, on the same page as far as like her helping me with things because she was very good at helping all the older coaches, but we had a harder time, right? And so to like the main thing is you're going to eventually become the person who's then delegating and asking for help and then paying attention now as to what works for you as the person who's being asked, I think is really important as well for like moving forward, if that makes sense. So, what type of follower do you need to be in your current role? Sounds like a lot of you said survivor. I feel like everybody feels like they're just surviving right now. What type of follower?
I said in my role, a lot of it is implementer and partner because like manager is literally part of my title. Like I literally hire students every semester and I have to manage them. So it's like implementing the things that our director says, but at the same time, like my director is really good about asking for feedback. So there are cases where I get to be the partner and come up with, things that we get to go through and things that we want to implement and try and change. So, I think that's a lot of times I can be the conformist when I'm in my comfort zone, but like pushing myself to use those skills maybe that I've gained in survival mode would be a little bit more conducive to like being helpful.
Yeah, so your survivor mode is you're surviving when you're conforming, you're thriving when you're implementing and partnering. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Who else? What type of follower do you need to be right now? What does your current role require of you as a follower? It doesn't have to be exactly on this table. I just kind of put that up there to help you. Some of you might need to be yes people. I mean, like, in all honesty, if you're a first year GA, right? I know that we're not supposed to like just go get coffee and get people's dry cleaning and stuff. But I also know sometimes that's how the way of the world still works, right? And some of us might just need to be yes people, right? It might depend on who you're working for. It might depend on where you're working, which field, which department. So, I mean, like, and that's okay. You're not going to be a yes person forever. It's again what you're doing in that space of being the yes person. There's a good
Yeah.
story. Go ahead.
Oh, I feel like what you said about it depends on the person who you're working for is super important because like the guy I worked for was a coach of mine. So that relationship has already been built there from what I've known from him in the past. So it's a lot easier for me to do the things that he says because I know the type of leader he is and I know, kind of my role and what I need to be for him.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps if you know the person, right, beforehand, and if you've especially experienced a little bit under their leadership already. I also think there's a difference between knowing somebody and working for somebody. One of my favorite stories is about Eric Spoelstra, like that this guy. There was a young like intern in the NBA who was working and like people he would just say yes, yes, yes. He asked people to do it. He'd say yes to everything, and that how that guy eventually became Eric Spoelstra, right? So what I don't want y'all to take away from this is like, is it bad to be a sheep? Maybe, but what's worse is it's bad to be a sheep for a really long time, right? Maybe it's is it bad to be a yes person? Could that get you in trouble? Sure, the whole, hey, if your friend jumped off the bridge, would you do it too? Whatever, right? Everybody's parents probably said that to them. But what's worse is staying a yes person forever. So I do think that some of these types of followerships fit different circumstances, and the most important thing is that you're not staying in one of those quadrants for the long run, right? You're finding ways to become more effective. And so my last question is, if you were now the leader, right? Kind of what Gabby and I were talking about a second ago. Like what would you look for in a follower? Like what would be your top three characteristics or skills that you'd want in an effective follower on your team?
We all kind of said like accountability, the ability for them to be able to take criticism and like to work through that, but also for them to be able to let us know like when we're messing up or when we need to be, like addressing something.
Okay. I think those are great. I think they're really lofty. I think when you hear accountability and ability to take criticism, that screams maturity to me. That screams self-awareness to me. And then the whole challenging the leader, I think the leader then has got to be the one that really builds that equity into the relationship so that when it comes time for that challenge, that leader feels safe and comfortable enough to make that happen. So I think that's a good end on. We're at 12:55. And so now you kind of see how this is going to go. We have one more next week at some point, I think Wednesday night. So if you join us, great. If you don't, I'll provide the recording and I'm going to stop recording. So thank y'all for being here.